Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a conflict that's really escalating into a major crisis for Pakistan, the decades-long struggle in Balochistan. What's been a simmering insurgency for years is now, well, it's threatening to boil over, and the fallout could reach far beyond the region's borders.
Doesn't bow, doesn't sell, only fights. This powerful Baloch slogan, it really captures the spirit of their fierce, generational fight for independence. It's a declaration of resilience, and it helps explain why, after more than 70 years, this conflict has suddenly hit a new, incredibly intense flashpoint.
Okay, so let's get right into it. What is actually happening on the ground right now? Because in just the last year, this conflict has completely transformed from a low-level insurgency into something that honestly looks and feels a lot more like a full-blown war.
A huge part of this shift was the unification of several different militant factions into one single cohesive force, the Baloch National Army, or BNA. And this isn't just, a name change. It's a major strategic shift that's allowed for bigger, much more coordinated, and way more damaging attacks against the Pakistani state.
A pretty stunning example of this new phase was the hijacking of the Zafar Express train. This was not some random act of violence. It was a meticulously planned, almost military-style operation. The BNA used an IED to derail the train. They took hundreds of people hostage, and then they selectively released certain passengers before this deadly siege began. It was a very clear and pretty chilling message about their growing sophistication.
So that's what's happening. But the big question is why? Why is it all happening now? To really get to the root of the violence, we need to look at what lies just beneath Balochistan's rugged terrain.
$60 billion. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering value of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. You've heard of it, this massive network of roads, railways, and pipelines. It's a cornerstone of China's global ambitions, and its crown jewel, the Gwadar Deep Sea Port, sits right on the Balochistan coast. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Look at how the profits from the region's vast gold and copper reserves are split. China and the rest of Pakistan take pretty much the whole pie, while Balochistan itself, it sees a meager 2%. For the Baloch people, this doesn't feel like development, it feels like extraction.
And this feeling of being exploited, it runs deep. Think about it. Natural gas discovered in Balochistan was piped to major cities long before it ever reached Baloch towns. The jobs from these huge projects, they overwhelmingly go to outsiders. Local fishermen have lost their livelihoods, and land has been bought up for pennies on the dollar. It's a long, long list of grievances that's just fueling the fire of this insurgency.
But here's the crucial point. This isn't just about money and resources. It's also about identity, about history, and a profound sense of betrayal. So let's rewind and see how this all began way before CPEC was even a thing.
Before Pakistan was even created, the heart of modern Balochistan was actually an independent state, the Khan of Kalat. It had treaties with the British recognizing its sovereignty. When the British left, another agreement even reaffirmed this independence. And yet, just 7 months after its ruler declared independence, the Pakistani military moved in and forced its leader to sign it all away.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the central, really painful irony at the heart of the Baloch story. The very same man who was hired as a legal advisor to argue for Kalat's independence, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, later became the founder and leader of the nation that would absorb it. You can imagine, for many Baloch, this felt like the original act of betrayal.
And that forced accession in 1948, well, it wasn't a one-off. It set a devastating precedent, creating this cycle of revolt, then crackdown, and what the Baloch people see as repeated acts of treachery by the Pakistani state.
Take the story of Nawab Naroz Khan. In 1958, this 80-year-old tribal leader led a fierce rebellion. His forces were eventually cornered in the mountains, but the Pakistani army offered a deal. Surrender, and you'll all be granted amnesty.
And to prove they were serious, the army officers swore on the Quran. Now, in Islam, that is the most sacred, most binding oath you can possibly make, a promise made before God. So trusting in this holy vow, Nawab Naroz Khan and his fighters, they agreed to surrender.
But the promise was broken. The moment they surrendered, they were arrested. Nawab Naroz Khan died in prison, and his sons and nephews were executed. This event became a foundational wound in the Baloch psyche. It cemented this deep, generational distrust of any promise made by the Pakistani state.
So now, fast forward to today. This long, bitter local conflict, it's not just local anymore.
Because of its strategic location, Balochistan has been dragged right into the center of a new geopolitical chessboard, and it's attracting the attention of some very powerful global players.
For China, it's all about protecting that massive $60 billion investment. For the United States, a volatile Balochistan offers both risks and, potential opportunities to counter influence in neighboring Iran and Afghanistan. And for India, Pakistan's arch-rival, instability in Balochistan is a huge strategic concern, with Pakistan constantly accusing India of fanning the flames.
And this brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought. As this deeply rooted historical conflict gets more and more intense, and as all these global interests converge on this resource-rich land, the ultimate question remains. Will the future of the Baloch people be determined by their own long fight for self-determination, or will their fate just become another move in a great game played by much larger powers?